Good day, friends. The war in West Asia is not over because Israel has not accepted it. It is up to President Trump to leash Israel, otherwise the peace plan will not work. As far as President Trump is concerned, he has made his pick of the two bad choices that he had. And the choices he had was to accept military defeat now or face national humiliation in a while. He has chosen military defeat now. In other words, President Trump has tacitly accepted that Iran has won the war. And this is the reason that he's now willing to discuss Iran's 10-point framework for permanent peace, where one of the important points is that Iran armed forces will remain in control of the state of Hormuz. Amidst all this, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, he has invited all the concerned people to come to Islamabad on 10th of April so that talks on the formalization of the framework for permanent peace they can be started. Now, what needs to be understood and remembered about this war is that this happened in a multipolar world where there are three great powers, America, China, and Russia. And of these two of them, China and Russia, they have played a significant role in this war. For example, these two great powers recently vetoed a UN resolution against Iran, which called for military force to open the Strait of Hormuz. Then these two great powers, they have publicly warned Israel and America not to use nuclear weapons. Then China has nudged Iran to take this or to accept the 14 days, 2-week ceasefire to discuss and finalize the framework for permanent peace. So the point to make is if permanent peace comes, then these two great powers, China and Russia, will be the guarantors of the permanent peace, and hence they will have a big role to play in West Asia, not as Hagi Imams, but as supporters of the New World Order. What I'll do in this video is I'll explain briefly how Iran has won this war and Israel and America have lost this war. Then I will talk about President Trump as to why he has no choice but to accept Iran's framework for permanent peace. And then I'll talk about the significant role played in this by Pakistan. And very briefly in the end, I'll touch on India, because on India, I'll do a separate video. So let me start with how Iran has won this war very briefly. I said right from the beginning that for Iran, this is a war of survival. Now, what a war of survival looks like. What is the physical manifestation of that President Trump would have recently seen? Recently, President Trump put out on the social media that he would bomb Iranian bridges, Iranian power plants, and the whole civilization will die tonight. He obviously expected the Iranians to get scared. Instead, the visuals that he would have seen would have horrified him. He would have never imagined those visuals that instead of getting scared, the Iranians, young people, men and women, they came out in hordes in very large numbers, made a human chain, held the flags of Iran, and came on the bridges and the power plants that Trump wants to bomb or destroy. So this would have certainly dissuaded President Trump from going ahead with his war for the simple reason that all that he was told by Netanyahu, that look, what will happen is that if you remove the top leadership, given the fissures which are there in Iran on religious ground, on ethnicity, they will all happen and the country will come apart. Instead, what he saw was the solidarity of the Iranians. And if he understood a big thing, a big message was given out by the Iranians here. And that message is the difference between a civilizational state like Iran and a nation state like America. But now coming to how Iran has won the war. And everybody now knows that this is one war for which Iran was preparing for decades. So Iran was preparing to fight an asymmetrical conventional war at all the three levels that a conventional level war is fought. And I have explained in my videos that a conventional war is fought at three levels. Top is the strategic level, then the operational level, and the lowest is the tactical level of war. And they identified the strategic at the operational level very correctly. The Iranians at the strategic level, they understood the vulnerability of America, which is the state of Hormuz and the state of Bab-el-Mandeb. And at the operational level, they once again understood the vulnerability of America, which is the American bases on GCC nation soil. And at the tactical level, I have explained, is about battles. It is about attrition. It is about bean counting. It is about numbers. And therefore, a key requirement when you fight a battle of attrition is there is a need to have indigenous production capability to meet the war surge, something that the Iranians had planned meticulously. They have underground production capabilities, indigenous, supported, of course, by China and Russia. And then I also spoke about in one of the videos how the Chinese supported the Iranians with their BEU-3 satellite constellation. So right from the beginning, it was very clear that America, that Iran will not lose this war. It cannot lose the war. It was prepared. Now, as far as Israel is concerned, here is an interesting case. This war for Israel is a war of choice. But the it has a problem. A war of choice, Italy means that the country, which is Israel in this case, should be able to fight with Iran at all the three levels because it is a war of choice. The level of strategic, operational, and tactical. And yet Israel does not have the capability to fight with Iran. And this is the reason that the Israelis got Trump or the Americans to come and fight with them at the tactical level. So what the Israelis are hoping is that fight the tactical war, a war of attrition with the Americans against Iran, but make sure that this tactical level war does not end. They do not want to accept a ceasefire. They want the war to expand. They want the war to become regional because through this, what the Israelis are expecting to accomplish is their strategic and operational level objectives. So the point I'm making is simple. While they cannot fight a war at all the three levels, they are fighting at the tactical level, hoping to achieve the objectives at the strategic and operational level. And what are the objectives? Now, everybody knows that at the strategic level, the Zionists want to have a greater Israel, but this will not happen now. And at the operational level, what they are looking at is that the Central Command of America, it come under its command, Israeli command. So while they have no problems at all with Trump not fighting the war and leaving the war, they will continue fighting the war because they want the Central Command to come and keep helping them in their war against Iran. So now it is up to President Trump to decide what he wants because today, President Trump, as the commander-in-chief, if he was to withdraw the capabilities of the Central Command, there is no way that Israel can fight with Iran, a country which is 1,000 kilometers away. But this is something that President Trump has to decide. Now, as far as the American war is concerned, right from the beginning, for Trump, it was a war of whim. Why a war of whim? Because he was made to believe by Netanyahu that he could do a Venezuela and Iran just as he got the Venezuelan oil. If he can also get the Iranian oil, then he will have more leverage over China. So because it is a war of whim, it was not planned at all. It was all about tactics. But here was a problem. When you fight a tactical war, as I said, it's a war of attrition. You need the production capabilities, something that America does not have to meet the war surge requirements today. In other words, what does the war look like? Let's see it. The Iranians who won the war, they were prepared and they fought the war at all the three levels. Whereas Israel and America, they are fighting the war only at the tactical level. Now, I want to make 2 points. There are very respected American analyst people like John Mearsheimer who have made 2 points, and I want to talk about them. Now, John Mearsheimer, a hugely respected professor, knowledgeable man, he has said in a couple of the videos that, look, military history tells us that an air campaign alone cannot win a war. You have to launch the ground operations. And the second point that he made was that this war, Iran war, could become a longish war as long as the Vietnam War that Americans fought, which was for 10 years from 1965 to 75. I disagree with both the points that he has made, and it is necessary that we understand why I disagree. Now, please recall Operation Desert Storm that the Americans fought in 1991 under the leadership of General Norman Shostakov against Iraq. Now that war, there was a total of 44 days of air campaign with practically no ground war fought for the simple reason it was a mere 100 hours and the ground war was just mopping up operations. How did this happen? Because the Iraqis were fighting at the tactical level. Whereas this war, the Americans fought at a different level, at the operational level. They showcased capabilities that the world had not seen before, things like their battle networks, their space capabilities, as well as precision munition. So that war that they won, where there was no need for a ground war, they won because the adversary or the enemy was at the tactical level and they were at the operational level. It is opposite in the war here in Iran. Please understand here, as I have just said, the Israelis and the Americans, they are fighting a tactical war against Iran, which is fighting at all the three levels. So what is the choice that President Trump has today? So his choice was that he assembled about 65 to 70,000 troops, including some special forces. Now, when you look at the other side, for for a war of attrition, a ground war, they can assemble something like 10 lakh soldiers, because this 10 lakh will include their Revolutionary Guard, their military forces, as well as the militia. So compare 10 lakhs with 65 or 17,000, 70,000, it is minuscule. It is not good enough to fight a war of attrition, especially against Iran, who is fighting on its own territory, who knows about its own territory. So all that the Americans could do, and in my assessment they were planning to do, is some special operations and then declare victory. And the problem is that one of the operations that they had planned went terribly wrong. Now, please remember that on the 3rd of April, we got to know that there was an operation done in Isfahan province of Iran where the Iranians had shot down an American F-15 aircraft, which has a 2 crew member. So one of the crew died and the other went missing. And then we were told by the Americans that, look, now they are trying to find the missing crew member who's hiding somewhere. But see the capability that they assembled to find that one crew member. Reports came that something like 200 special forces were brought in. Then they had to, after the operation, destroy one of the C-130 transport aircraft on the ground, their own aircraft. Then they lost 18 and Thunderbolt aircraft, and then 2 Black Hawk helicopters were also lost. When you look at the capability, it doesn't make sense at all. It doesn't square up. Why would you need all this capability to find one member who's gone missing? And then, of course, the stories came that they were trying to do a special operation to get hold of enriched uranium of Iran, and they failed in that. And they also failed to realize that the Iranians did have the air defense, which they used at the appropriate time to shoot down all these aircraft of the Americans. So this operation went terribly wrong. It convinced President Trump that even the ground operation would not work and he had to end the war. And in my assessment, that is the reason he ended the war. Of course, there are other reasons also. I'll come to that. Now, as far as the war be as long as a Vietnam War, it doesn't make sense for 2 reasons at all. The first reason is now we all are aware, and I have said repeatedly, that Iran was fighting a high-intensity, high-tempo war at all the 3 levels. So that is not a Vietnam War, which was a guerrilla war. Guerrilla is tactics. This is entirely different war, a asymmetrical, conventional war. And then in this war in West Asia, every day there was global economic and financial implications. So the war could not go on very long. So President Trump had no choice but to make the decision to end the war and to accept the 10-point peace plan of the Iranians on which they want to do the discussion. And if I have to summarize, what are the reasons? These are the reasons why Trump is completely helpless. The first is he actually has no military option. If he wants to continue with the ground war, a war of attrition, then he needs more troops. Then he needs a draft, and he cannot do the draft without the authorization of the U.S. Congress, which will not come. Then, as I said, President Trump would have realized that this whole physical manifestation of the war of survival that I spoke about, this would have petrified him. He wasn't expecting this sort of oneness that all the Iranians would come together. Then he would have realized that the Iranians already have put out the list of 18 American tech companies which they would destroy if the war went into escalatory phase in the GCC nations. And all these tech companies, they have been built on petrodollars, and surely Trump doesn't want them to be destroyed. Then it was very clear to Trump that his war is hugely unpopular at home amongst his MAGA base. And then think of it in his own national security strategy that came out in 2025. There it was clearly put that he wants to be remembered as the president for peace. This is the legacy he wants to leave. So obviously now what he has done runs contrary to the legacy that he wants. Then we know that the Secretary of War picks it. He sacked a couple of generals, some 6 of them, including the Army Chief of Staff, who obviously told him that a ground war will fail and America in some time would be facing national humiliation. And then he obviously hopes, President Trump's hopes, that if he doesn't continue the war, if he ends it now, then there is possibility that at least 4 of the 6 GCPCC nations will continue trading the oil and gas in petrodollars. See, as far as Oman and Qatar are concerned, they have made it very clear that they are now aligned with Iran. But Trump hopes that maybe UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudis will continue the trade in petrodollars. So in other words, Trump had no choice at all. Now I want to talk about Pakistan, which has played a very important role in this war. It has traveled a long distance from being a credible mediator to being the bridge between the leader of the present world order, that is America, and the new world order. I'll explain this now. Pakistan's credibility got established in West Asia after Operation Sinindu that it did against India, where it showed, as far as America was concerned, military credibility, and West Asian countries were also impressed. So the next thing was for Pakistan was to establish itself in this war as a credible mediator. And this happened on 29th of March when in Islamabad, a quadrilateral consultation was held where 4 foreign ministers got together, the host foreign minister of Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and they came up with a draft possible ceasefire plan, but Iran was not interested. In ceasefire. It never has been. Iran has been looking for permanent peace only. So with this draft ceasefire plan, which was acceptable to the regional players, the foreign minister of Pakistan traveled to China, met up with the Chinese foreign minister Wang Yi, and the two sides in Beijing issued on 31st of March 5-point peace initiative for de-escalation of the war and showing a diplomatic way forward. As I said, Iran was not interested in the ceasefire, but Iran surely would have been impressed by the overt interest taken by China. But as far as Pakistan was concerned, its credibility as a mediator got established that it is acceptable to all the 3 great PS in the multipolar world, and it is acceptable as a mediator to all the regional paths in West Asia that matter. Now, it was this, after this established credibility, the next step was now, which is when President Trump has agreed to discuss on Iran's framework for permanent peace, something that Iran wants. And once again, the Pakistanis, they have offered Islamabad as the venue that the mediations can happen here, and the possible date suggested by them is 10th of April. Now, here, both the sides' top leaders are expected to come from Iran as well as America, and reports suggest that from the American side, Vice President J.D. Vance will travel. Now, what this means is very simple. When we look at the present world order and the leader, which is America, the situation is that because of this war, its followers, which were the global North nations, they have completely distanced themselves from America. And I don't have to go in the details. Countries like Italy, the NATO members, France, Germany, UK, South Korea, Japan, Australia, all these countries are not participating in this war. They have distanced themselves from America. So the only country today for America, which is a great power, which can be the mediator, is Pakistan. And President Trump has thanked profusely the Pakistani leadership, the Pakistani Prime Minister, the Army Chief Field Marshal Aim Munir on social media. Now, as far as Pakistan is concerned, this is today then the only country which is the bridge between America, which is the leader, still is the leader of the present world order and the new world order, because Pakistan is a member of the new world order. It's a global South nations, and it is acceptable to the other 2 great paths which are there in the New World Order, China and Russia. So the profile of Pakistan obviously has shot up more now. So this is what needs to be understood, that Pakistan has traveled a long distance, and it is not only a credible mediator, its profile has shot much more than that. Now, as far as India is concerned, I just want to make 2 points on India because, I'll do a separate video on India. And it is all very clear that the Modi government is totally aligned with America. I don't have to dwell on this now. But the 2 points that I want to make are this, that whatever Iran is doing for India is not because of Modi government, that it likes the Modi government, because as far as the Iranian leadership is concerned, it has repeatedly requested the Modi government that as the government holding the presidency of BRICS, they issue a statement that America and Israel have been the aggressors against Iran in this war, something that India will not do. So whatever Iran is doing is because of the civilizational links that it has with the Indian people. This point needs to be understood. And the second point that I want to make is that I was delighted to see that the leader of opposition in the parliament, Rahul Gandhi, he put out a tweet. And in this tweet, this is what he said, that use of nukes cannot be justified under any circumstances. It's a very bold statement, and it says 3 things. First, this tweet off is it shows the respect for the civilizational linkage that India has with Iran. Then this talks about India's civilizational itself when a tweet like this come, because India's civilization is about tolerance and coexistence, which is the antithesis, the opposite of Zionism. And the third thing it says it signals is, or it suggests, is that the thinking of the leader of the opposition is aligned with the New World Order, because in the New World Order, the 2 great powers, China and Russia, as I have said earlier, also, They publicly warned Israel and America not to use nuclear weapons. So as far as Iran is concerned, Iran would have seen this tweet with a lot of interest because it matters. Thank you so much.